welcome to Bookspin. The theme I'd like to talk about today is post-apocalyptic fiction, which I think is a particularly thought-provoking subgenre, because this form of literature really challenges the reader to imagine the fragility of civilization and consider how humanity might adapt in extreme conditions. It also serves as a powerful lens for exploring anxieties about the real world that we live in today. And like all good science fiction, it can shed some light on what it means to be human. So, I've picked out 10 post-apocalyptic novels to discuss that I can thoroughly recommend. Let's dive in. I'm going to start off with the book I've just been reading, and that is The Wall by Marlon Houseover. So this is a really fascinating novel. It was originally published in German, and it's been described as a feminist classic, and both dystopian and utopian, and an example of pastoral science fiction. And it's got quite an intriguing setup. So a woman takes a holiday in the Austrian mountains at the start of the novel with her cousin and his wife, and she wakes up to find them both disappeared. So she sets out to investigate, and then she finds that some kind of giant invisible barrier now separates her from the other side of the valley. An invisible wall that she just cannot cross. And on the other side of this wall, some kind of mysterious, devastating catastrophe has befallen the world, because all animal and human life beyond the wall has frozen and perished. So how this has happened is not clear. At one point she speculates that maybe it's the result of some kind of experiment or secret weapon by a major world power. But in any case, she suddenly finds herself the sole apparent survivor of the human race. And the narrative that follows is her account of her survival in this extreme isolation, and it's a lot of arduous work she has to go through to survive. But she manages to develop a close bond to some animals that she takes care of, including a cow and a dog and a cat. And she tends these animals, and while she does everything she can to survive, such as cultivating potatoes and catching trout, chopping wood and fetching hay, these kind of things. So it's a really intriguing novel, I think. I've never read anything quite like it. At first, I was a little worried about how engaged I would be with this book, because it's got only one human character, and no dialogue. And there are no chapter breaks at all throughout the whole book. But in fact, I think it's really beautifully written, and it's very poignant, and it's a fascinating foray into one woman's survival and coping with loneliness. And it's also quite a profound and meditative reflection on humanity's relationship with nature and our dependence on nature. So it's not your typical dystopian post-apocalyptic book, but I really loved it. Next up, The Children of Men by P.D. James. This one has a really compelling concept. It's set in the year 2021, in which we have a dystopian vision of a world in which humanity faces extinction due to a global infertility crisis. All men have lost the ability to produce sperm. How and why is unknown, but no child has been born since 1995, known as Year Omega. So as a result, society is collapsing under the weight of despair. Authoritarian rule has taken hold, and people have basically lost their sense of purpose. So it's against this bleak backdrop that this story takes place. And we follow a small group of dissidents in the UK who harbour a secret that might just offer a glimpse of hope for the survival of the human race as they fight an oppressive and dictatorial regime. So I think the fascinating thing about the apocalypse in this book is there is no dramatic, cataclysmic event that wipes everything out in a flash. It's more of a gradual, hopeless decline. So you can imagine how in the first few years, people still hold out some hope that scientists will find a solution to what's going on, a cure to the infertility, and perhaps it's not going to be so bad. But as the years go by, as the decades go by, and children disappear from the world, and there's no more young people around, that's when things start to get really depressing and civilization crumbles. So it's pretty nihilistic, really. But it's fascinating, and it's very well written, and it's got a very memorable and engaging story, so it's worth checking out. Next up, The Death of Grass by John Christopher. This novel is an excellent portrayal of just how rapidly society can collapse and revert to barbarism when food security disappears. In this story, we witness the rise of a virulent new plant virus that kills off grass species. At first, it just affects rice crops. This virus breaks out in China, causing massive famine and chaos in the region. The world looks on in alarm, but a great hope is placed in the promise of a new pesticide that will foster the breeding of resistant crops. However, when a mutation of the grass-killing virus emerges and proceeds to kill all species of grass, that's when things start to turn really pear-shaped. Rapidly, all types of grass start to die out, including staple foods, cereal crops like wheat, oats and barley, as well as rice, causing the mother of all famines to spread across the globe, including in the UK, where this story is set. But what's most terrifying is not so much the food shortages as the rapid breakdown of social order that so quickly follows as people abandon their social norms and their values and even their humanity as they do whatever they deem necessary to survive. As society quickly descends into anarchy, we follow a small band of survivors as they make their way across this bleak, grassless landscape in search of a refuge in a fortified potato farm in the north of England. So this is a really chilling and thought-provoking read, and its themes of environmental challenges and sustainability have a timeless relevance. Next we have Severance by Ling Ma, which is a fantastic satirical dystopian novel that I don't think gets talked about enough. In this case, the apocalypse is caused by another global pandemic originating in China, a mysterious fungal illness known as Shen fever. And this is a really scary disease. Not because of what it does to your body, but what it does to your mind. Victims get trapped in endless repetitive routines, which they perform unconsciously and uncontrollably until they eventually die. So that is what happens when you get this disease. And it's a highly transmissible disease with no known cure. So it's basically curtains for humanity, except for a very small population of survivors who are for some reason immune to this disease. And in this story, we follow a young Chinese American employee in New York City who becomes one of the last survivors as she reflects on her life before the pandemic and her immigrant roots and her experiences with corporate culture, as well as the disease itself. She is, of course, resistant to the disease. The tone in this novel is quite poignant, but it's also very satirical. And there's some really standout, dark, dry humour. Shen fever is itself a kind of metaphor for the absurdities of modern work life and consumer culture and the kind of dull and repetitive routines that so many of us act out every day of our lives to the point where it crushes the soul. The Shen fever victims likewise enter a zombified state, and they keep on acting out the same mundane, repetitive actions until their demise. So it's a great premise, I think. It's entertaining, it's thought-provoking, and it strikes a good balance between satirical humour and existential dread. Next up we have The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, a dark and thought-provoking dystopian tale, and one of Wyndham's best. Looming large over this story is a massive catastrophic event known as the Tribulation. This event took place sometime in the past. What exactly happened is never made clear, but it's kind of implied that this was some kind of nuclear apocalypse. Whatever it was devastating, and it drastically altered the world, causing widespread social collapse and the spread of genetic mutations. So that is the backdrop to this story. The society that emerges out of this chaos is very strict, very religious, and authoritarian. And this novel takes place in a small, isolated community with religious fundamentalist values. People believe that the tribulation was a punishment from God for the sins of earlier generations. And in order to prevent it happening again, everyone must follow God's word and God's law and preserve humanity's true image. So people are in fact obsessed with purity and genetic purity. and this has become the foundation of their culture. So any living thing which is seen as abnormal is considered to be an abomination and must be rejected or destroyed. And this includes animals and plants as well as people. So it's interesting because this is a world in which genetic mutations are in fact relatively common because of the tribulation. And this doctrine fosters a climate of intolerance and fear to anyone or anything who is even slightly different from the accepted norm. So it's a thoroughly dystopian world-building premise. And it's a bit of a problem for the protagonist, who is a young boy who discovers that he has telepathic powers along with a few other children. And while this is not a visible abnormality that other people can easily detect, it's still very dangerous. And he has to keep this secret. And this drives a lot of the conflict in the story. It's a very suspenseful read with some very intriguing world building that blends dystopian and religious elements to explore themes such as morality, power, and the fear of the unknown. Next up we have World War Z by Max Brooks. This novel is subtitled An Oral History of the Zombie War, and it documents the global aftermath of a devastating zombie pandemic. And it's got quite an interesting structure. It's a series of interviews with survivors. So we have a United Nations worker who serves as the narrator and the interviewer. And he travels the world to gather stories from a wide range of people and learn their perspective on what happened and how they survived. And these interviews kind of function like short stories. And they shed some light on the origin of the virus outbreak, the social collapse that ensued, and the terrifying struggles that people went through to survive, as well as humanity's resistance and eventual recovery. So the cause of all this is a mysterious, deadly virus originating in a Chinese village. What is it with all these strange diseases coming out of China? Anyway, those who succumb to this terrifying disease reanimate as zombies and prey on the living. And through various attempted cover-ups and political incompetence, this disease quickly spreads across the world via routes such as smuggling and the movement of refugees and the illegal organ trade. And it's not long before the outbreak totally spirals out of control and social order collapses. So this is a post-apocalyptic tale that incorporates horror, military science fiction, and social satire to great effect. And the interview structure provides a fresh and compelling storytelling device. Right, next we have The Never-Ending End of the World by Anne Christie. An underrated one this. This novel takes place in a near-future world in which a bizarre apocalyptic event known as the Loop has left only a small fraction of humanity intact. Those who fell victim to the Loop are now trapped in time, endlessly repeating the final moments of their existence. They've lost consciousness and free will, but somehow seem to stay alive in a never-ending time loop. And those who are stuck in this condition become known as loopers. So there are some similarities here to the Shen fever victims in Severance. But in this case, it's not a disease, and the loopers don't die of this condition. The cause of this phenomenon is very mysterious, but it seems to stem from a profoundly strange disruption in time and physics. And in this story, we have a protagonist, Coco, who has somehow managed to survive alone in Manhattan since the loop began. She is surrounded by loopers, and she has to carefully navigate the city in order to avoid danger and develop the skills for survival, before she eventually develops the urge to leave New York and explore the world beyond. So it's a rich and imaginative tale with an immersive plot and a very intriguing mystery, and plenty of engaging adventure and suspense as well. So it's well worth checking out. Next up, A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter Miller. This is an absolute classic, another one that I read quite recently. This novel is set in a remote desert abbey in a world desolated by an apocalyptic nuclear war known as the Flame Deluge. And it imagines a future Dark Age society where Catholic monks are the custodians of humanity's knowledge, while the rest of humanity has reverted to barbarism. The monks of the Order of Leibowitz work tirelessly to preserve the surviving remnants of pre-deluge science and technology until the world is ready for it once more. So this story spans many hundreds of years, and it's split into 3 epochs. And these basically function as 3 novellas. Over time, civilization gradually rebuilds itself, and we witness how the monastery and the world changes, and the cyclical nature of human history plays out. So it's an ambitious concept, I think, but Walter Miller pulls it off really well. At the start of the story, we get introduced to a young novice monk who stumbles upon the remains of a fallout shelter in the desert, and he uncovers some ancient remains from pre-deluge civilization. And it becomes his life mission to protect these relics. So the discovery and its implications set the tone for the whole novel, which beautifully captures a blend of science fiction and religion, with plenty of atmospheric world building and thought-provoking themes. But it's also got some humorous touches as well. So I think this is a timeless novel and a great read. And my next recommendation is Galápagos by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a sharp, satirical novel that delves into human evolution and the pitfalls of human intelligence. So in this story, we have a small group of survivors who find themselves stranded on the Galápagos Islands after a global economic collapse. And we've got a mysterious condition that leaves the rest of humanity infertile. So these few individuals are in fact the last people on Earth capable of breeding. And over the next million years, their descendants gradually transform into a new post-human species, an aquatic species that is more streamlined They have furry skin and seal-like properties, and they are freed from the complications of excessive intellect. This is quite a weird one, this novel. It's narrated by a ghost, an immortal spirit who has been watching over humanity throughout the ages. And he is reflecting on human nature and human intelligence while witnessing our ultimate transformation into this new state. So that there's quite a lot of philosophical musings going on here. But there's also, being Vonnegut, there's a lot of dark humour. The themes are really serious, and the premise is bleak, but it's narrated in a really wry and detached way that makes it incredibly amusing. So it's kind of profound and thought-provoking, but also very funny at the same time. Quite an impressive achievement, I think. Finally, we have Service Model by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Fantastic read, this one. This book is set in a crumbling post-apocalyptic future Earth, in which a vastly dwindled humanity has become almost entirely reliant on robotic labour. So it's kind of suggested that there was never any single great apocalyptic event that wiped us out. It's more of a case of a gradual decline caused by our excessive dependence on automation. So as the robots assumed more duties, human oversight faded, leading to inefficiency and societal decay. And as humanity started to die out, the robots have basically taken over themselves. With no one left to manage the machines, they carry on with their programmed routines, resulting in a very strange robot-dominated world. It's quite eerie and also very absurd. These robots continue to carry out meaningless tasks without any humans around to maintain them. So they're maintaining defunct systems and serving absent masters. And one such robot servant is the protagonist of this story. His name is Charles, and he unexpectedly kills his master at the start of the story, apparently the result of some kind of technical fault. So this sparks him to set off on a journey of discovery into this broken world to try and find purpose and seek out a new master, since this is the whole purpose of his existence, according to his programming. So I really enjoyed this one. It's quite a delightful yarn with some great absurdist humour, despite the bleak backdrop. And I think this is a really great showcase for Tchaikovsky's imagination. So that completes the list. Thanks for watching. Of course, there are plenty more great post-apocalyptic books out there. This list only really scratches the surface. One prominent one that I really want to read, for example, is Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. So feel free to share your own recommendations in the comments. Anyway, see you again soon, and stay tuned for some more science fiction content.